LittleBigPlanet, or LBP, is a series of games that I fell in love with over 10 years ago. And after so many years, it's become an important part of my channel and even an important part of my life. At its core, LBP was just a floaty puzzle platformer, but the defining factor of these games, the feature that made it stand out, was user-generated content. Play, create, and share was LBP's iconic tagline ever since the very first game on PS3. And over time, talented creators in the community managed to use the in-game tools available to make some amazing stuff. Of course you had your 2D platforming levels, but by the second game, people were making films, music, costumes, and eventually levels that went beyond the platformer genre. And even today, people are still creating, playing, and sharing with no signs of slowing down. I've already talked about the entire LittleBigPlanet trilogy on my channel. I've gone through the progression of each game by discussing the new mechanics and ideas each new entry offered. I even shared my memories of playing with friends, memories of exploring the endless sea of community-made content, and last but not least, mentioned how much I adored the fantastically crafted story mode levels in each of the games. But ever since LittleBigPlanet 3 launched in 2014, we never saw another mainline entry. So today, instead of going forward, we're going to go back. Back to the past. Okay, not that far back, but back to the game that was my introduction to the LBP series, LittleBigPlanet for the PSP. Yeah, this was my first LBP game. In fact, besides Family Guy the Freakin' Sweet Collection, which wasn't even a game, mind you, LittleBigPlanet was the only PSP game I ever had up until, well, recently. But this bite-sized adventure combined with my white Darth Vader PSP at the time brought my 9-year-old self so many months of enjoyment. Although LittleBigPlanet for the PSP was considered somewhat of a spin-off or watered-down counterpart to the first game in the series, it actually released a year after, on November 17th, 2009. This version was mainly developed by a team formerly known as Studio Cambridge, which went on to become Guerrilla Cambridge, which then went on to dissolve and shut down in 2017. But Cambridge was tasked with creating an entirely new LittleBigPlanet game for Sony's PlayStation Portable system. The original creators of the first game, Media Molecule, or MM for short, actually had some part in developing LBP PSP in tandem with Cambridge, but to what extent I have no clue. Digging up the development for this specific game has not been an easy task. But Cambridge was a studio that already had a history of making games for PlayStation platforms, with the Medieval series on PS1 and PSP, and their last game before shutting down, Riggs Mechanized Combat League for PSVR. And for a team like them to take a crack at LittleBigPlanet, this relatively new franchise at the time, impressed me, because they did a pretty damn good job. I'm honestly shocked by how well they nailed the feel of LittleBigPlanet. It had both a well-made story mode and a very limited but still somewhat bearable create mode. You can say this PSP game was just a mere spin-off, a simplified counterpart to the PS3 game, but the game played as if it was a mainline entry. In fact, the story itself was a direct sequel to the first game, and every single level in story mode was completely new with unique characters, unlockables, and environments. The story itself was nothing notable. Sackboy goes on a vacation after the events of the first game, which ends up turning into a quest to gather a group of people called the Creator Curators, so they can all meet at a carnival at the end of the game. Again, nothing too crazy. Just like LBP1 though, this game had you exploring levels that were based off of real-life locations, such as Egypt, Iran, Hollywood, and much more. The characters themselves were also styled after the first game's characters, much like everything else in this game. They are simply cardboard cutouts. Sure, it's not a step up like the Sackbots in LBP2, but it's still fine. I mean, the simplicity of the characters fit the tone and style of early LittleBigPlanet, and they're just as likable. As for the story mode levels, Studio Cambridge made sure every single one was a blast to play through. And just like LBP1, as well as other games in the series, this version had a very fitting feel-good music tracks to play along to. I would love to share some of the music in this video, but due to copyright issues, I can't really do that. Just go do yourself a favor after this video and look up Glockenpop by Spiderbait and tell me it doesn't just scream LittleBigPlanet to you. Tell me it doesn't sound nostalgic even if you didn't play this game before. That's just how good the music is. Now that I think about it, I never really gave a lot of credit to the soundtracks in these games, but whether it's the licensed music they use from independent musicians or the music specifically made for LBP, they always perfectly capture the atmosphere of LittleBigPlanet. No matter the game, no matter the developer, every music track that's picked always fits and sounds amazing. And the PSP game is no exception.
Oh, it's a tight one in here. Star Wars Battlefront Renegade Squadron, I like that. White Darth Vader PSP, nice unit. Collectible, that's great.
Customize your weapons better you can.
Dude, get your own Star Wars Battlefront Entertainment Pack. PSP.
This version of the game is also infamous for the lovable Sack Nana costume. Yeah, the banana Sackboy meme originates from the PSP game. This banana costume is part of the Fruit Salad DLC pack, and it saddens me to say that I couldn't download it on my PS Vita, the system I'm using to play this game on, the system I'm using to capture footage. But yeah, for whatever reason, it seems like DLC for PSP games just aren't compatible with the Vita? I guess, I don't really know. But if you have a PSP, there are quite a few DLC costumes you can pick up for completely free. All of which, by the way, are unique to this version. Yeah, it seems like every single DLC costume and even most of the base game costumes were made only for the PSP version, and I'm surprised none of them ever came to mainline games, not even through DLC. That means Sack Nana is forever stuck on the PSP, and unless we get a banana Sackboy costume in the new adventure game for PS5, he will only remain a distant memory. Now this game is definitely not the best in the series, not even close. For one, mechanics from the first game had to be simplified or just straight out cut. This was obviously due to the PSP being a lot weaker than the PS3, and it's to be expected. For example, the 3 playable layers from LBP1 was slimmed down to just 2 playable layers, and it worked fine. Cambridge made sure the story mode levels were built around these limitations. They were still fun as heck to play through, and that's really all that matters. And I honestly applaud them for what they accomplished. Another cut mechanic was multiplayer. Yeah, multiplayer wasn't in the PSP version, and again, I understand why, but it still sucks. The multiplayer was a big factor as to why I loved this series, but it not being here is understandable. There were still, however, community levels. Yes, thankfully, in the PSP version you were still able to create levels and publish them. At least, you used to be able to. Unfortunately, the LBP PSP server shut down in 2016, which sucks, for me especially, because I never experienced this firsthand. When I had a PSP back in 2010, I guess I didn't know how to connect it to the internet, which led me to not knowing about this feature's existence for a long time. However, I did hear that there weren't really a whole lot of great levels to play by other people, mainly because the creation mode that I brought up before severely restricts the amount you can do with it. Sure, it had some new additions, such as a static object type, which would later be used in future games. And hey, Sackboy was given multiple new animations to express himself with. Honestly, there wasn't a lot of new content. This game took away more than it added, and there were some very huge omissions that make level creation a hassle to even do. You can't scale objects anymore, so you can't make them bigger or smaller. There are no global settings, so water doesn't exist. Paintinators aren't in the game. You can't put stickers on Sackboy, there is no customizable grid, and most importantly, dynamically shaping objects is one of the least intuitive things ever, and brings down the entire creation mode for me. Despite all of this, I think Cambridge did a decent enough job translating most of the PS3 tools to the PSP version. And you have to remember, this game is running on a handheld in 2009. There's not a whole lot you can do when the hardware itself was so limited, but they still managed to cram in as many options as they could. And even though there wasn't too much worth playing online, it saddens me that even after being a longtime fan of the series, I'll never get a chance to play those community levels. I know there's probably some sort of archive out there with all of the PSP levels, or at least most of them, but it's just the fact that I won't get to play them the way they were intended that bothers me a bit. It really makes me wonder though, how much longer will the servers for LBP 1, 2, and 3 last? Because soon enough, the entirety of the LBP community, all of those levels, comments, reviews, hearts, will disappear someday, and my entire view on the world will turn upside down. But no, in all seriousness, it will happen. LittleBigPlanet Karting, Mod Nation Racers, and PlayStation All-Stars all had their online servers taken off even more recently than LBP PSP, and some of those games came out after LBP 1 and LBP 2, which really says something about those games. Why would they still be up and not the others? My guess is that the active players are keeping those games alive. If people weren't still playing, Sony would have no good reason to keep the servers up. So if you still love these games, enjoy them while they last. One day you're going to wake up in a world where Shark Survival and Angry Bird Bomb Survival levels are no more. Ultimately though, this was a pretty solid attempt at a LittleBigPlanet game. Nothing crazy, mind you. It was on the PSP for crying out loud. It was never going to be as grand and robust as its PS3 counterpart, but I liked it for what it was. And it's still worth playing today, only if it's just for those story mode levels. It was definitely nostalgic going back to this game for the video, but I still had more fond memories and more fun playing LBP 1 and LBP 2. Nothing can top those.
LittleBigPlanet is now available on PSP and new PSP Go, which means you can play, create, and share your Super Sackboy adventures wherever you are. Your adventures, your ideas, your community. Your whole world in your hands.
So, that was LittleBigPlanet for the PSP. Technically the second game in the series, and a game that I played much earlier than LBP 1. Next on the list for LBP retrospectives is the Vita game, which means I'm only 2 games away to completing the entire series. Now trust me, I have a lot of plans for future LBP videos once I run out of games to talk about, and I still plan on making content on other games too. Yes, I am aware that a new game starring Sackboy is coming to PS5 pretty soon, and I'm super excited for it. But since we have a big adventure on the horizon, pun intended, I thought now was a pretty good time to take a deeper look at some of Sackboy's smaller adventures, some of the lesser known LBP games exclusive to Sony's handheld systems. And I know, this video was long overdue. I promised I would cover the PSP game, Vita game, and karting game over a year ago, and I apologize. I'm going to try my best to deliver at a more reasonable time in the future. But to end things off, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for all of the support these past few months. My LittleBigPlanet retrospectives, my discussion videos, and even my live streams have been getting a lot more attention, and the subscriber count has essentially doubled since last year. I would also like to thank you for all of the support on Patreon. Goofball124 and more recently Medusa's100 has helped out a lot with the channel this past year, but you can always support the channel by liking this video, sharing it with friends, and subscribing, but if you want to, the Patreon link is always there in the description. Anyways, have a nice day, and I'll see you later. Goodbye.